Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to all of our nominees who are here today. Mr. Souness, I would just like to first congratulate Senator Booker for a very insightful question about the Port of Piraeus, but I also want to comment on your very thoughtful answer and approach as a business person. We need more people with your sort of background in these important diplomatic posts. So congratulations to you on your nomination, and thank you for bringing that, excuse me, that perspective, that valuable perspective to diplomacy. Mr. O'Brien, I'd like to ask a question of you regarding sanctions with respect to Iran. In my prior post as U.S. Ambassador to Japan, I worked very hard to get Japan to agree to so-called secondary sanctions, to get them to stop buying Iranian crude oil. In fact, we worked very hard to make that happen around the world, and we reduced Iran's crude exports by 75%. Today, Iran has accelerated its exports through more clandestine activity. Their exports now are approaching the levels they were before these sanctions were ever imposed. And we have a team negotiating in Vienna that's wondering why Iran won't come to the table. Well, Iran is getting the revenues that it needs. It's getting the fuel that it wants to continue to become a nuisance around the world. They're the largest state sponsor of terror, and they're generating revenue in this regard because we are not properly implementing these sanctions. Iran is being allowed to produce more oil. Can you speak to what you will be able to do to help properly implement these sanctions and stop this?
Thank you, Senator. It's an incredibly important question. For all of the arguments that have gone on about the right approach to Iran, I think there's strong bipartisan agreement that Iran is a malignant actor. It is, as you say, a sponsor of terrorism. It brings instability across its region, and its nuclear program allows it to threaten oil supplies and the globe. So this, plus the ballistic missile program, are all items that we have to find a way to address. I will work to implement sanctions fully and effectively. That means working with our partners, and thank you for your work bringing the Japanese along and other allies who had been large consumers of Iranian oil and petrochemical products. We're now in a situation where a smaller set of states have decided to scoff at international sanctions. And so we have to adapt our program to be able to stay one step ahead of them. There is real impact if Iran is forced merely to work on, a bartering or cash and carry basis. But we need to try to start shutting off those avenues. And so not just with regard to Iran, but globally, I thank the Congress and the administration for setting a new policy course dealing with anti-corruption activities, because the ability to interdict the flow of money, the sort of opaque flows of money that allow for sanctions evasion will be a tremendously important tool for addressing these concerns going forward. So that's something, as I learn more, I'll be happy to speak with you about.
I would appreciate your continuing to follow up this committee. I'd like to touch on another area of concern, and that's North Korea. Again, while I served as U.S. Ambassador to Japan, North Korea launched intercontinental ballistic missiles over Japan. They even tested what I believe was a hydrogen bomb while I was there. We imposed maximum pressure at that time. What we're seeing now, though, is a resurgence of North Korea's belligerence. They're testing hypersonics, they're testing intercontinental ballistic missiles, yet the current administration has only begun to impose sanctions in December with only one tranche of sanctions. Can you speak to what your plan would be for North Korea?
Well, I will be happy to work with you on that as we go forward. As you say, the administration is putting in place its policy. I think a strong sanctions program is a critical part of our approach to North Korea, not just unilaterally, but with our friends and allies. And again, your experience in Japan will make you a really important colleague in developing that.
I hope you'll commit to keeping this committee informed on a regular basis of your progress with sanctions.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cleveland, I'd like to turn to you very quickly to raise an issue that is deeply important to me. It has to do with one of my constituents that's suffering in the Japanese criminal justice system, the so-called hostage justice system of Japan. Secretary Blinken is well aware of the problem. Many members of the State Department are and are working on this. But I would encourage you and ask that you take a hard look at all of the tools that the United States might implement to help Mr. Greg Kelly, who has been trapped in the system for over 3 years, to get him home, to get him released. This is a situation that has bipartisan support by members of this committee, which I very much appreciate, and it's something that is greatly concerning to me, and it's an injustice that's gone on for far too long, and it damages our national interest with one of our strongest allies, Japan, and America. So I would very much appreciate your commitment to take a very hard look at that.
Thank you, Senator, for raising this very important humanitarian concern. I would absolutely work with you in this committee to look into this. I am somewhat familiar with the difficulties with the Japanese criminal justice system, and they are a matter of concern to me. But I will certainly take great interest in the situation of Mr. Kelly.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Several members have not been able to attend the hearing because of former